Over the weekend, two pretty prominent software engineering influencers got canceled on tech Twitter, and it was actually pretty crazy how much anger and hate there was going on. And it was largely around their brand new product that they released onto the internet, onto tech Twitter. Essentially, these two content creators, Frying Pan and Nang, sorry if I'm totally butchering the pronunciation, and over the past few months on their own YouTube channels and on social media in general, they have been documenting their entire process about creating their brand new AI-powered code editor called Pear AI. And it's also an open source tool. This is where a lot of the controversy comes in, but more on that in a little bit. So these two people, they applied on YC and then they got in, and then over the weekend on Twitter, Frying Pan actually tweeted out onto the internet saying, I left my $270,000 a year Coinbase job to go out and build this tool, Pear AI. And this is all for good intentions, just to launch the brand new product that they're trying to build, but they kind of got destroyed and obliterated on the internet, specifically on tech Twitter, for launching this product. And a lot of the anger and controversy for this comes from the fact that the base of their technology, the base of their code editor, Visual Studio Code, as well as Codium, these are both open source tools. And essentially these two individuals, Frying Pan and Nang, they forked VS Code and forked Codium and then reskinned it and then added their own commits, added their own changes to it, and rebranded it as Pear AI. And essentially a lot of tech Twitter got really upset because they're like, wait, what the heck? This person literally just forked Codium, forked VS Code, rebranded, did a little bit of work, and then they were able to raise $500,000, $750,000 from Y Combinator. How is that even fair? This is the antithesis of the open source tool. This is so anti the open source movement, and kind of rightfully so. If you look at it from that perspective, it feels a little scummy. It just doesn't feel right. Now, is this technically a valid thing to do? Kind of, yeah, like that's the beauty of open source, but it is like a little bit of a gray area. It's like, is that ethical? I'm not too sure. Now, I'm not an expert on the whole open source license experience, but I think another additional aspect of controversy came from the fact that they got an open source license for Pear AI, but the open source license was the incorrect open source license, and they basically got a lot of flack saying, this isn't real open source, you're still trying to like make money off of this open source tool that you didn't even build. That's so messed up. And obviously there is a lot of anger to be had because this kind of feels, once again, a little murky, little gray area. It feels anti the spirit of open source. But outside of the whole licensing issue, they actually have preserved the commit history of VS Code as well as Codium. They've shown all the open commits that users can look at. People can contribute to the code base. It truly is open and collaborative for anyone to contribute PRs to. But basically, a lot of people are angry because they were taking this open source tool. It looks like they just made a few slight changes and then they tried to commercialize it. And from now, I want to give my personal opinion on this. It's kind of complicated. Now, I've already mentioned before, it is kind of nuanced. This feels a little gray. It feels not the greatest thing to do, but at the same time, the base code of Codium and VS Code is kind of open source, so people can do what they want to. And then they started getting a lot of flack for this. Now, addressing the incorrect open source license that they licensed Pear AI under, one of the founders gave a justification for this, saying, sorry, I just chat GPT'd and asked what open source license I should use. I didn't actually go dive deep into the nuances of what is the best and correct license to use. And a lot of people were like, bro, what the heck? You were a YC funded startup. How could you even post this or do that without being like really scrutinizing of all the meticulous legal details and legalese? And I think there's both sides to it. But at the end of the day, like, yeah, like this is just a small startup. And really it's because these individuals are pretty big content creators, and because their tweet went really viral, that's the reason why they were able to get canceled, because they got so much attention for this. But I'm here to tell you that so many early stage startups, they don't know legal stuff. They don't deal with legal stuff because oftentimes they don't have that many users to deal with it, or they don't have to run into those types of issues. So I'm going to guarantee that other really gigantic startups out there, they've probably had a lot of issues, technically incorrect and wrong legal document whole thing in the beginning, but they kind of just got away with it because they didn't really have that many users. And it's just the fact that the creators of Pear AI are so big and so popular that they got a lot of blowback on this because they kind of went viral on social media talking about their tool. So I really do have a good amount of sympathy for these two founders that, you know, they just didn't have the correct legal document, because I think that's really common for a lot of startups because they're often busy building and selling the product and not too focused on the correct technical legal documents. So it is bad that they did that, but at the same time, they did follow up and say, sorry, I messed up. I just used ChatGPT for this. I'll fix it and update it to the correct license. But I think the real crux of the issue is the fact that it feels really scummy to take an open source tool, fork it, and then commercialize it and make money off of it and get into YC and raise $500,000, $750,000 for it. I understand why that feels scummy, but at the end of the day, that's kind of what Cursor did. But then obviously Cursor started that way, and then now they've branched out into a much more complicated product with a lot of their own modifications added to it. And a lot of other open source tools kind of started that way as well. Everyone builds off of a certain base of something. And I think the big downfall for Pear AI is simply the fact that they're just not fully developed enough yet to fully differentiate it from what's available with Codium and VS Code. It just looks too similar so that it gives a lot of people enough ammunition, enough desire to want to hate on the product, because it literally just looks like a reskinned version of VS Code and Codium, which is tough, you know, tough luck. And sure, these people were able to get into YC and raise a little bit of money, but that doesn't necessarily guarantee success. I do think a lot of people really overinflate what it's like getting into YC these days, as if like every single company that gets into YC is guaranteed to become like multimillionaires coming out of it or cut. But the fact of the matter is, the vast majority of companies at YC do not end up that way, and most of them just shut down without any users or very, very little revenue. And that's very possible for this group of Ning and Frying Pan for this to happen with their product Pear AI. So yes, like people could feel salty that, oh my god, these people got into YC like by forking an open source tool, what the heck? But just because you get into YC, it's not indicative of any success either. So I do think people are kind of overinflating like the prestige and the benefits that come from getting into YC, and people are just upset that these two people got in with this open source fork of an open source tool and they got into YC with that. But at the end of the day, I think this is just fair game for people to want to be haters. Now, once again, in the past, I've also said that I do not know Frying Pan, I do not know Ning, I don't know either of these two content creators. I've never spoken to them in my life, and I really don't think they're out there trying to be malicious. I do think it's just unfortunate that because they're still so early on in their product and there's not enough differentiation from the original VS Code and Codium fork that they created, and the fact that they're both pretty big influencers and they have a lot of following, that this product unfortunately got a lot of limelight at a really early and a really bad time, before a lot of the technical legal stuff was created and figured out, and before the product was further developed and differentiated enough from Codium and VS Code. So I do feel kind of bad for them. I also agree what they did wasn't totally 100% kosher, totally correct. It is kind of a gray area right now. But at the end of the day, I don't think they had bad intentions. They're just two kids trying to build something and do their own thing the open source way, but they didn't really know exactly how the open source community operated and worked. So I feel kind of bad for them, but at the same time, what they're doing isn't like, it doesn't make me feel 100% great. I'm like, yeah, there's no issue with that at all. A part of me does feel like, yeah, you know, a little gray area, a little murky, but I do feel bad for them. So I do think this is just another example of the internet kind of being really toxic, and another great example of why I personally would never want to build for the developer crowd, because while if they love your product, they will absolutely love you and praise you so much, I do think they are one of the most die-hard, devoted user groups out there, and if they get on your bad side, you will kind of get wrecked during that process as well, because they can turn on you very, very quickly. If they love you really passionately, they can also hate you really, really passionately if you give them reason to do so. So that is my take on the whole Pear AI situation with Frying Pan and Ning. I don't really care. I think what they did isn't 100% great, but it's also, I don't think 100% illegal. I think it is a little frowned upon, but also I think it's also fair game eventually as their product differentiates, and they kind of just got blasted with a lot of limelight because they're pretty famous on social media, and that sucks for them. But yeah, that's my take. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.